This is another master printer that I work with, Maurice Sanchez. He's a Taramid-trained printer. Taramid Institute is nearby in New Mexico. Amazing guy. And here's Maurice rolling ink on a really large wood block of mine. And you can see how that happens. And so you see he's rolling red ink on this wood block, and where the white area is what is cut away so it does not receive the ink. And here's a picture of me threatening Maurice. Actually, this is a series of 3 really large wood blocks, which you'll see there. And this is one of the first things I did after 9/11. As I said earlier, we live a couple blocks from 9/11, and I was downtown. That's a longer story. And we were very affected by it, needless to say, as everybody was. And when I went back, working with Maurice, I'd cut these 3 big wood blocks out, and I knew I wanted to do this series of 3, but I hadn't figured out the palette. And it's called Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. And I know that the colors in these wood blocks are directly reflect how I was feeling about life at that moment. Whereas yesterday is kind of fading and golden and soft, and today is hot emotional energy, and then tomorrow is kind of like dark and not so, and a little blue and not so sure of the future. I also looked at Chinese screens, and where an image is broken into 4 parts. And it's a wonderful way, again, to work with handmade paper and to work with a really large water image. You know, and again, here's an example, the wood block. And this was an exercise in real, it's like mathematical calculations practically to keep all these guys in order. But with the monoprint, I get to, I love the fact that all the color in here is through the monoprint. So I get to paint this painting over and over again, which is like, always gives me an opportunity to do better, to make it better, to make it a little different. And then on top, I have this really beautiful woodblock image that kind of organizes all the color that I have put underneath. So I'm going to just show you, this one's in the show, but this shows you, I mean, they really change from print to print. I get to work with the same palette, but there's really beautiful, subtle changes from each. So I got to do it 24 times. There's 24 prints in this series, and that is real labor. I mean, that's kind of a lot of big drain of energy. Another big woodblock print. I love working large. Embrace. I was again thinking about, you know, the kind of like an embrace, this water being embracing, and then release. While I was shooting pictures of water, I started shooting pictures of trees. For no good reason other than I was trying to think about my gestural marks in the monoprints outside of abstract expressionism, which has a very long, fruitful history, and different from calligraphy. And when you think about it, for years I shot pictures of bare branches because I wanted to study the gesture as an opportunity. And what's nice in the city is that trees have so much, they go through so many, they have to deal with the elements of the city, and they get chopped up and they get cut back, and so you get wonderful gestures in your trees in the city because they don't get to grow as naturally as they might out in the country. And it was only a matter of time that the trees ended up first in the prints. And in this series of prints I explored duality. I was interested in trying to take the same gesture, the same tree gesture, and work with them side by side, but on different types of paper. So in this series, there's a plain sheet of handmade paper that's been cut into a 9 by 10 inch image, and then it's paired with a monoprint that I've done with the same image on top. So looking at how these things would push and pull each other. And these images were done with lithography, which is another printing process, a little bit more complicated to explain, but it's not a relief printing process. I made this paint. It took me a while for the trees to show up in the paintings. I still kind of wasn't sure how I wanted to deal with it in the paintings. I made this painting in response to 9/11. You know, with Ground Zero only a few blocks away, it was a tough time, and really, except for doing the woodblock prints, I really couldn't paint for a while. And that whole year before 9/11, I had been struggling with my painting, and I was throwing more things out than I was saving. I knew that I wanted to somehow incorporate the tree element into the painting, but every attempt I made to do it didn't seem to work. And every artist goes through those periods where it was working in the prints, but somehow I didn't know what I wanted to do with the painting. Well, in 1999, a couple of years before 9/11, I had taken a picture of this tree. And this tree was downtown Manhattan, and it had this, and I took this picture because I love the beautiful gesture of this tree branch. But right behind it, right there, was the World Trade Centers. And I didn't do Photoshop at that time, right? And I remember at that time looking at that, shooting that image, but being really angry at the World Trade Centers. I mean, like my kids played in the shadow of the World Trade Center. They went to school at the foot of the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center loomed very big in our neighborhood. And I remember thinking that day, oh, those stupid World Trade Centers are all out of character. They ruined the thing of the landscape. If they weren't there, I'd have a clean shot of this beautiful branch. Well, when I was finally thinking of trying to paint again, I had this whole painting that was unfinished, all this stain and color on it. I just started projecting slides of trees on this painting, saying, okay, see what happens. And suddenly this image showed up. And right where this red stain was the World Trade Center. And you know what? I get goosebumps even when I talk about it now. I felt so bad. I felt like, oh my God, it's my fault. Really, I mean, I'd give anything to bring it back. How could I have ever felt that way about the World Trade Center? And so I painted this painting as an homage to the 9/11. I said, I'm going to project it, and I'm going to paint it as carefully and as lovingly as I can. And after I finished, and then this is kind of an olive branch, and afterwards, when I finished, I said, maybe I'm onto something. So I did a whole lot of fun. And this opened up one of the most productive painting times and print times I had in years. With the block lifted, I continued to work with veils of paint and to play with different gestural elements in the painting, and and learned a little bit better how to paint some water. And then I started combining the prints with the paintings. And here, and these paintings, I would actually take an oil stick. It's like a big oily crayon, and I would lay a piece of Japanese scroll paper on top of a big wood block, and then I would rub it. You know, like you can do rubbings on gravestones or rubbing on, manhole covers. Well, I would do a rubbing of my wood block, and then I would take that paper and I would glue it to my canvas. And so here I've got a great big black rubbing of one of my prints, and this started establishing a very strict horizon line in my paintings. And here's get a sense of scale. Addison Ripley, Addington Gallery in Chicago, you get a sense of scale. These are big paintings. DM Contemporary in New York. My bare trees grew leaves, which was helpful. And then in 2003, I decided that I had been buying and loving handmade paper for so long that I wanted to make something as beautiful as what I would collect from all over the world. So I started working at the Dudinay paper mill in New York. And again, I was working with a master paper maker who knew what they were doing, thank God. And because it's hard to pull a beautiful sheet of paper if you don't know what you're doing. And so she and I worked together, and after a lot of experimentation, we were able to pull the kind of sheets of paper that I thought rivaled the beauty of the handmade paper that I worked with. And so I started this series of landscapes, and I decided that on the handmade paper. The handmade paper acted like a monoprint for me, in that all of the color, everything that's not black in this sheet is part of the handmade paper. That big buckets of pigment. Paper pulp looks a little bit like curdled cream. It's thick and it's goopy. And you can put paint pigment in it, and then you can paint with it on handmade paper. And so that's what I was doing. I put together a palette and I would paint. And it was amazing to work this way. And again, I could make unique pieces of paper, and every one was a little different. So I was trying to think of all the different ways that landscape works. And these images come from the James River Peninsula in Virginia, which to me is like the perfect three-part horizon. You get sky, you get earth, and then you get water reflection. Wonderful thing about working with the handmade paper is that you can do things with this that you really can't do with oil paint or acrylic paint or watercolor. This piece in particular, James River Spring, the way this blue just kind of broke up on that surface is so much like the way clouds break up. Now, I don't know how I'd paint that, but it was a gift to have it in handmade paper. I love capturing subtle atmospheric effects. And also working with the paper pulp, I couldn't work with a brush. You can't use a brush, so I had to be really inventive. I'd scoop it up, I would squeeze bottles, I would dribble it. Amazing. But in my paintings, I still found for a long time that 9/11 still kind of showed up. Here, this is called Hot House. Singed but not burned. Getting better at painting those water ripples. Frail strings.